The Disney brand has long been upheld to the highest standards when it comes to the presentation of their iconic characters. But what happens when one of their characters isn't fully controlled by Disney? What happens when Donald Duck accidentally becomes a college sports mascot? What's up, mascot fans? It's Dan here, back with a history lesson about one of America's consistently voted favorite sports mascots, the Oregon Duck. The origins of this duck go way back. So far back, in fact, that I had to put on my best of Funkland impression to do this weird story justice. Christmas Eve, 1776. General George Washington crossed the Delaware River to surprise the British in southern New Jersey. But in order to discreetly cross the river with thousands of men packed into cargo ships, he enlisted the help of a special militia from Massachusetts. And it's thanks to this group of professional fishermen and sailors who piloted these boats that General George Washington and his men were able to turn the tables of the American Revolutionary War. The Special Massachusetts Militia was affectionately known as the Webfoot Regiment. Webfoot was a pejorative term at the time used to describe locals of the Northeast who lived and worked in extra wet conditions. Years later, the Massachusetts descendants of the Webfoots would pack up and relocate to a new part of America, with rolling valleys and new beaches full of fish to be caught, in the northeastern corner of Oregon, settling a town they lovingly dubbed Salem. Oregon soon became known as the Webfoot State, and in 1909, when the University of Oregon began searching for an athletic nickname, Webfoots was an obvious choice. The college team held onto that moniker into the 1920s, when students turned to the name the Ducks, after the tradition began of abducting ducks from the local pond each week to serve as the team's mascot. The students, unironically, named the duck Puddles. And this is where the story gets interesting.
Dan. Yeah, that impression doesn't sound anything like me. Just go back to laughing, having fun. The sincerity is creeping me out. I'll be the serious one.
At the peak of Donald's popularity, well through World War II and into the 1940s, his unique cartoon design had seeped its way into the minds of the Oregon student body, where regularly the school's real-life abducted athletic mascot Puddles would be portrayed in satirical comics drawn for the school newspaper and appeared strikingly similar to Donald Duck. This went on for some time, much to the knowledge of the Disney company, who weren't exactly thrilled. Walt Disney visited the campus in 1947 and was enamored by the school's spirit, and based off of nothing but a handshake and a nod, agreed to allow the campus continued use of the Donald Duck image for their school mascot. This was very on brand for Walt, who loved a little bit of hero worship, as long as that hero was him. Everyone thought this guy drew Donald Duck. Meanwhile, Ub is back in the animation studio crying into empty sheets of cartoon paper. At the same time in the 1940s, it was pretty much unanimously decided that a live duck would no longer be used as a mascot during the games. Far too many Humane Society complaints, quote, suck the fun out of it. Okay, Oregon, heard you loud and clear. I can't believe the student body was like, ah, my gosh, people who care about the welfare of animals are complaining far too much about the welfare of our animals. It took a few years, but the student body rebounded with homemade mascot pieces. And let me tell you something, these photos of these vintage duck mascots are akin to like horror photos that you might unearth in the midst of the second act of a very spoopy movie. Giant bird heads stuck on human bodies is truly a sight to behold. I don't know what kid was watching Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds when he came up with this idea, but my God, am I terrified. But you know what? Honestly, the students worked very hard on these, and I have to admire their spirit. They continued bringing mascots to their game long after they couldn't pick up a duck from the pond. This is actually a great spot to thank many alumni of the University of Oregon who have fantastic blogs about the college history, including the Atomic Redhead blog, who dug up some really great images from the Oregon official archives. I'm gonna put a bunch of links in the description below, highlighting lots of great duck coverage. The first official full-bodied mascot actually debuted the same year that Walt Disney visited in 1947. And believe it or not, this mascot is still on display at the Hall of Fame at the university. And it is a monstrosity of ingenuity. At the time, I think that they successfully pulled it off, but my God, look at this thing. It's nothing more than a pile of fake fur, yarn, and paper mache. But you know what? I love that. Hats off to you guys. I've never seen a duck with a mullet until today. But you know what? Party in the back, business in the front. That's what I always say. Now, this is where things become very American corporate greed. After Walt Disney passed in 1966, the Disney Corporation soured on the use of Donald Duck as an imagery for the university and took them to court. Now, because there was no formal agreement, no signed contract or licensing that Oregon had from the Disney company, they were kind of in trouble. They faced possibly losing Donald if it wasn't for one key piece of evidence. This photo of Walt with Puddles in a Donald Duck Letterman jacket helped uphold the informal agreement that the school had with Walt Disney, and they were able to keep using Donald Duck. In 1973, they entered an official contract, and Disney would struggle over the next several decades to regain control of this situation. The new agreement allowed Disney some creative control over their mascot, including training the mascot performers and preventing the mascot's use in anything outside of sporting events at the University of Oregon. The school ensured Disney at the time that the performer and the mascot would properly represent the character at all times. The modern mascot of this duck is super cute, by the way. It looks like another nephew of Donald, honestly. It's Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Puddles. This is a very sharp-looking, cartoony duck mascot. It really blends in, and when you look at it and you squint a little bit, you're like, oh yeah, that could be Donald. I'm sure plenty of confused toddlers who live somewhere around Eugene, Oregon, thought that this was Donald Duck for many decades growing up. Disney, though, on the outside was seemingly playing nice. In 1984, they even flew Donald to Eugene, Oregon on his birthday airport travel tour. But in 1989, they changed the contract to their agreement with the University of Oregon to begin including royalties for all duck merchandise sold. Disney saw a fat wallet there and was like, I'll take that cut.
Here comes the money.
Here we go.
In 1991, it was declared that any merchandise with Donald on it could only be sold at the campus university, as Disney continued to tighten their grip on the mascot's use. And in 1994, they switched to the more typical UO logo, allowing it to expand its merchandising sales, and eventually landing on the now iconic singular O design. The Magic Candle Company brings the vacation to you. Head on over to magiccandlecompany.com and use coupon code DisneyDan15 to take 15% off all of your favorite theme park smells. From your rides to your resorts to some of your favorite foods, every one of those theme park smells is there. magiccandlecompany.com, coupon code DisneyDan15. Now, despite the tensions between the college and the mega corporation, in 1995, the University of Oregon made it to the Rose Bowl. And, believe it or not, they invited Donald's doppelganger into the Disneyland park for a big parade. And I think that this might honestly mark the only time a Disney mascot that isn't a Disney mascot appeared in a Disney parade. Think about that for a second. When was the last time you saw the Michelin Man in a Disney parade? But it was clear that internally the university was experiencing some pressure or urgency to change the face of its mascot program, and they turned, of all places, to Nike.
Just do it.
One of the co-founders of Nike, Phil Knight, is a University of Oregon alumni and has showered the school with only the best sports gear and equipment. So, as the sports program evolved and faced all of these branding issues, Nike stepped up and delivered an egg packed with a brand new mascot. No, I'm serious, literally an egg. They literally dropped an egg off on the football field and debuted a character that was inside of it, and this is what hatched. This Darth Vader duck dressed like Neo from the Matrix. What exactly is going on here? And this isn't even an original idea. 12 years before this happened, the same exact thing happened for the WWE with the Goobly Gooker. Does everyone remember him? No, of course you don't, because this is a bad idea. As soon as I showed Kenny this egg mascot, Kenny was like, oh, the wrestling did this, wrestling. What was it? What's the name?
Gobbledygooker.
The Gobbledygooker. Now, while many people called this the Robo-Duck, it had an official name, and that was the Mandrake. And he was meant to appeal to younger generations of cool kids and bridge the gap of marketing materials while Donald the mascot was held under so many restrictions. Mandrake was never meant to replace the Donald Duck mascot. Instead, he was supposed to be kind of like a companion. And let me tell you something, nobody liked this thing. And I mean nobody. It barely lasted months before the entire thing was cut, much like the Gobbledygooker. Giant corporations literally learn nothing. Like, there is a lesson to be learned here, and it's something about not counting your eggs before they hatch in a basket or something like that. I don't know, I'm not a philosopher. Right, can you imagine Disney puts an egg in the Haunted Mansion for the Hatbox Ghost to crack out of? It's like, oh, this is a great idea, we'll have them hatch. Donald, or the Duck, or Puddles, honestly, whatever you want to call it, the many articles that I read refer to this thing named very differently. It just kind of depends on when you went to college and what everyone was calling it at the time. Now, this duck had developed a routine wherein he would begin to do push-ups at any successful point scored by his team. So, you know, the football team scores a touchdown or a touch pass or a ball in the fork, and the duck, he just starts doing push-ups because he's hyped. It's a simple shtick, and everyone loved it. You get super hyped seeing your duck explode out in the field with this physical feat of like joy and adrenaline. The fans love it. But this is where the story takes a tragic turn. It's September 1st, 2007, and the Houston Cougars are in town fighting off against the Oregon Ducks. And they brought their mascot, Shasta, the cougar. And Shasta had a great idea. Every time their team scored, Shasta would do push-ups just like the duck, seemingly mocking him. Now, this didn't settle well with the performer inside of the duck mascot, and the two escalated into an unplanned altercation that took everyone by surprise and certainly did not improve relationships with Disney. It's sort of wild seeing a Disney character just beat the crap out of another mascot. And now that's very on brand for Donald Duck, but the implications of the fight were not very on brand for Disney. Donald Duck's a rage machine. What else did you expect him to do? Someone else is doing his bit. You're dang right he's gonna march over there and beat up that cougar. And have you ever seen a duck beat up a cougar? It's not something natural. You never see that in the animal kingdom. To top that all off, a few years later, the duck mascot would make an unofficial appearance in a student-driven music video celebrating another road to the Rose Bowl. And this really worried administration. And they were justified to be worried because this was a breach of contract for the duck mascot, who, remember, was not allowed to appear in any kind of media appearances. And this video kind of went viral. It kind of blew up for University of Oregon fans and also generalized fans of the duck. No matter what this duck was doing, it seems like all he could do was ruffle feathers. The video was so popular, they made a sequel to it. They remastered it, and that video has even more millions of views. In hindsight, I would say that the University of Oregon should have just walked away from the whole Donald thing years ago, decades ago, rebranded their logo and kind of just made the duck just look a little bit different and kind of recaptured the spirit without having to divert off into Nike territory or try to hold onto the threads of this long-running duck agreement with Disney. They should have just walked away. But it was Disney who walked away in 2010, ultimately releasing the college of any of its continued use of the duck mascot, because now Donald and his imagery used on merchandise and promotional materials was long gone. The university was now using the O logo. They had this duck that was really not all that similar to Donald Duck anymore. It was a major departure from the original agreement, and Disney decided to just cut ties, and honestly, all for the best. This duck is now just a distant cousin to the idea of Donald, a forgotten black sheep of the duck family. But even now, this year, he continues to be voted like the favorite college sports mascot of America. People love this guy. And honestly, at the end of the day, this duck has transcended Disney, Donald, even the Webfoot Regiment that helped give it its name all the way back in 1776. He is now uniquely him, and I've got to respect him for that. Crowd surfing, doing push-ups at America's loudest college football stadium, making memories for future generations to come, as long as this college exists, which, you know, in today's market's anyone's guess. Will colleges be even around by the time my kids need to go? I don't know. Can anyone even afford college on a single duck salary? No, they can't. Not without going into lots of debt. And you know what? Ducks love debt because they like to pay their bills. Right off the top of my head, baby, Dan's smoking today. Woo! So let me leave you with a final thought. As we slowly approach the idea of Steamboat Willie losing his copyright hold by the Disney company, that's just a few years before Donald will ultimately get released too. So if University of Oregon was really using some high-res thinking, they would snatch back up all of that Donald marketing and put Donald back at the forefront of their brand because they have established continued use as soon as Donald enters the public domain. Why not? Why not? We have a horror Winnie the Pooh movie. You know, he's in public domain. Why not go hard on the duck? Well, sports fans, thanks for watching. I don't know much about sports. As you can tell, I'm a theater major, but it's always fun talking about sports mascots and the performers inside of them and the fans that keep the spirit of those mascots alive. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Head across all of the holy social media channels to let me know if you're an alumni of Oregon, if you've met the duck himself, or what college mascots I should dive into the history of next. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, you rock.